Hey everyone. Before we get into this week's episode, just wanted to hop in here and correct some mistakes that I made throughout this week's episode. Recorded it on Tuesday while listening to it back. I realized I made some errant mistakes, so just wanted to hop in here and correct those real quick before we get started. First mistake was I mentioned that Oladipo wasn't playing for Indiana Pacers in the playoffs, and in fact he is playing, and that was my mistake. Another one, I don't believe I mentioned who won the Miocic Cormier fight, which is obviously Miocic by decision. So I just wanted to hop in here and just correct those real quick. Apologize for those mistakes and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm your host, Anish Patel, and this is episode 3 of 5 for podcasting. As always, I want to start off by saying thank you to everyone who subscribed, followed, rated the podcast on social media, on different podcast platforms. It is greatly appreciated, and it definitely helps with getting the name out there and helping the podcast move up in the rankings. If for all the new listeners and new followers, if you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, available on almost all podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to rate us. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram and Twitter. The Twitter handle and Instagram handle are both the same. It's at 5, the number 5, for podcasting. That's the number 5 for podcasting. You can also follow me personally on Twitter at avpatel730. Now that we got all the formalities out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode. So there is a lot to cover this week. We had a busy weekend in sports. Now that everything is starting to ramp back up, sports are starting to come back full force, which is fantastic. So this week we had NHL Playoffs round one. We're going through. We had the NBA play-in game between Portland and Memphis. We had UEFA Champions League quarterfinals this weekend. We also had UFC with Cormier versus Miocic. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correct or not. Apologize if I'm not though. So let's kick off with the with the NHL's first round of the playoffs. So I have quite a few observations. I wanted to first kind of dive into the teams that I think will look the best right now. There's really 4 teams that stand out to me that I feel have looked dominant since the bubble. That have looked dominant even before the bubble, and they're just continuing to truck right on. So there's 2 teams in the West that I think look really good, and 2 teams in the East. So the 2 teams in the West that I think have a great chance of getting to the Stanley Cup final are Colorado and Vegas. Both teams are juggernauts. Colorado, they have so much talent up front. Um, with McKinnon, with Landeskog, with Mikko Rantanen, they're just really stacked up front, and that kind of showed out last night when they played the Coyotes and beat them 7-1 and took a 3-1 lead in that series. Same with Vegas. Vegas, they may not necessarily have the big names that Colorado does, but they have, guys like Mark Stone, Paul Stastny, Max Pacioretty. They have really 4 lines that they can roll out at any time and compete. And in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the more you can roll out your third and fourth lines to give those top lines a breather and a little bit of a break, that's only going to better your chances to make a deep run. At the end of the day, especially with Stanley Cup playoffs, you're going to get banged up. You're going to get players injured. That's just the normal grind of the playoffs. these players are gonna be put through the ringer in terms of physical endurance when it comes to these Stanley Cup playoffs. And the fact that Vegas can really roll out four lines, that any four lines could really score, is a plus for them. And on the East, you have, in my opinion, the Islanders, who look awesome right now. I know they had to play in the qualifying round to just get into the playoffs, but they're on the verge of sweeping the Capitals in the first round. And I think that's a big testament to Barry Trotz and how he has this team coached and ready to play. Like I said in a previous podcast, I'm a big Barry Trotz supporter. He was the head coach for the Nashville Predators. He was their first head coach, and he was their head coach for many, many years. So anywhere he goes, I'm going to support him. After he left Nashville, he went to Washington, brought them a Stanley Cup, and now he's with the Islanders, and he looks poised to make another deep run at it this year. You know, the players that he has too on that team, they're not players that are really gonna stand out to you. You have good players like Anders Lee and Barzal and whatnot, but you don't really have any players that are gonna light up the stat sheet. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. As we've seen in the playoffs in the past, you don't necessarily need to have those players that light up the stat sheet. You just need a team that's gonna contribute in any way possible, and that means a team that's going to contribute from defense. Where the defense can jump in and help you score. A team that can have, again, your third and fourth lines contributing to the scoring. A team that has a goaltender that is going to stand on his head to steal a victory away in a game, and that I think is what the Islanders have this year. They have the ability to go in and steal games from teams that maybe people didn't think they could do. So I really like the Islanders right now. I think they're one of the top teams in the East right now in terms of play and how they've been playing. And that's no knock on all the other teams to the East. It's just the way that they've been playing. They're hot right now, and it's carrying over from the qualifying round to the first round of the playoffs. And then the last team that I wanted to talk about in the East is the Bruins. They won the President's Trophy in the regular season, only team to reach 100 points before the break. They came into the bubble. They did not play too hot in the round for seeding. They ended up with the fourth seed after being a number one seed, which they even mentioned. They said to them the seeding didn't really matter. They knew what their capabilities were, and they were going to show that in the first round. Now, personally, I didn't really believe it, to be honest with you. I thought if you're going to be, in that round robin, you've got to put your best foot forward to get the reps under your legs because they haven't played in 4 months almost. So for them to say that it was almost, it sounded like they were basically saying they had a switch so they could just turn on and they'd be okay. And like I said, I didn't believe it, but lo and behold, they have been able to flip that switch. And I thought Carolina, their first round opponent, I thought Carolina was a really good team coming into this first round. I thought they were going to give Boston some trouble, and they just really haven't been able to do that with them. Part of that could be that obviously last game, Svechnikov, one of Carolina's top scorers, got injured. He's probably going to be out for the foreseeable future. I think that probably had a lot to do with the morale of that game in particular. But even the first three games, Boston is up 3-1 in that series, but it just seems like they've owned that series. Even the game that Carolina won, it didn't really seem that Boston was even out of it, that entire game. And that kind of brings me to my next point with Boston is the big news out of their camp is that Tuuka Rask, their top goaltender, their Vezina nominated goaltender, opted out of the rest of the playoffs. This came as a shocker. I mean, he was, like I said, one of the top goaltenders all year long, and he has been. I mean, he's been lighting it up to say the least. But he has a newborn at home. He has other kids at home that he felt that it was best for his family that he needed to come home and opt out. And I can't say I knock his choice. It's up to everybody's own decision on what they want to do in terms of playing and their safety. So for me, family comes first at the end of the day. So for him to make that decision, I only respect him for it. Um, and it seems that the team and everybody is behind him. So there's not really much controversy there with him making that decision. And honestly, Boston, they have a more than a serviceable backup to take the reins in Yaroslav Halak. He's been in the playoffs before. He's played some big games before, and he's ready to take the reins. I mean, we've seen the last two games. He's let a total of 4 goals in, but that just could be he hasn't played in 4 months. So Boston's going to be fine, I think. I don't think they're you know, I don't think them losing Rask is going to hurt them too much right now. We'll see further on down the line how it's going to affect them. But as of right now, I think they'll be okay with the team that they have, and I think they'll handle. I think they'll handle Carolina pretty easily. I think they'll probably close this out next game. Now, that's enough hockey talk. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Champions League quarterfinals, the UEFA Champions League's quarterfinals this past weekend. The main game I wanted to talk about really was Bayern Munich versus Barcelona. Now, I'm a big Leo Messi fan. I'm a big Barcelona fan, um, and they just got shellacked. I mean, Bayern Munich is one of the best teams in the world, and they've been consistent for the last 20 years or so in terms of competing with the best teams around the world. And I can't even say I watched that game, and I can't even say that it was just Barcelona didn't show up as much as it was Bayern Munich just was the better team from start to finish. Um, you know, they are a loaded team. They are an experienced team, and they have a lot of guys that have played big games on that team. Not saying that Barcelona doesn't. They obviously do. They're also very loaded, but they just got outplayed. They got outcoached, and quite frankly, outclassed last Saturday on that field. And they Bayern just plain out embarrassed them. I mean, you look at their team, they got guys like Manuel Noir, who's one of the best goaltenders in the world. They got Jerome Boateng. They have um, Thiago, Philip Coutinho. They have Thomas Mueller, Robert Lewandowski. They are just completely loaded. And they just got overmatched. Barcelona did. Bayern Munich, um, they're probably gonna win the Champions League again this year. If I had to put my money on it, but yeah, I mean they were they were the better team, and I think there aren't many teams that are going to be able to match up with them and what they can bring to the pitch every time they go out there. Now, another thing that we had this past weekend was UFC, and the big headliner there um, was Cormier versus Miocic Part Three. Uh, you know, It I will say this, I'll preface this by saying I wasn't able to watch the fight, but I did see some highlights. Um, I did kinda read up on what happened there. Uh, Miocic won by decision. It looked like at one point in the fight that both guys were poked in the eye. Cormier's poke to Miocic looked accidental. It didn't look like he meant to get him. It's just incidental contact. But Miocic looked like he actually responded and really kind of drove into Cormier's eye there, and really kind of hurt his vision by doing that. And at the end of the day, it seemed like that was the decision maker, in the fight. Now, I know Cormier said after the fight that he was actually going to retire, that this was his last fight. Um, if he's going to stay retired, who knows? It'll be interesting to see. But he's had a great career. I mean, he had these great 3 fights with Miocic. He's always been a top card guy, and if he does leave, it'll suck for the sport, but he can leave at least with his head up high. Another big storyline to the UFC Fight Night was new up and comer Sean O'Malley. Now he had a lot of hype coming into this fight around him. Now he ended up losing, but that's just kind of because he ended up breaking his leg by it wasn't even something that the guy he was going up against did. It was just incidental. It was just one of those freak accidents where he went for a kick. He went for a kick and it just happened to break his own leg. So it was an unfortunate situation. I think he'll bounce back from it. So I wouldn't count him out completely yet. So um, you know, it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back and how he moves forward from this injury. Now, let's get into the main topic of this pod. That's the NBA first round of the playoffs. And just to preface this, I'm taping this on a Tuesday, so I don't know the outcome of Tuesday's games yet. But I was able to watch some of the games yesterday. Um, One of the games that stood out to me was the Clippers and Mavericks and Luka's debut in the playoffs. And I was hoping when I saw Luka play, when I first watched Luka play, I was waiting for this moment to see what he would do in the playoffs, and he did not disappoint. He ended up with 42 points. He played all right defense. I can't say it was great defense, but he played serviceable defense. But really, it was offensively where he stood out. They still lost the game. It's unfortunate that he has to go up against the Clippers, who are one of the favorites to win the championship this year. But he showed out. He balled out, and that is what I think a lot of people were expecting him to do. I think that is a lot of people were hoping that he would do, and he did. So it's really good to see that he was actually able to on the big stage perform and show out. Now, will he be able to make this a series against the Clippers? I don't know. If he keeps playing like this, I'd put my money on it. But he's gonna need some contributions from obviously Porzingis, from Finney Smith, and some of the other guys they have there. Now Porzingis yesterday, he ended up getting ejected middle of the game, or I guess second half of the game. Um, from he got teched up twice, and it just ended up being um, it just ended up being the second technical he wasn't a fan of and kind of took it too far, shoved a player, and that's what caused him to get ejected. Now, like I said, if Dallas wants to have any chance in this, he's going to have to keep his emotions in check and be the player that we've seen Porzingis be in the past. So, on top of that, we had the play-in game this past Saturday with Memphis and Portland to get into the playoffs. Now, Portland being the 8th seed, all they had to do was beat Memphis once, and they would advance. Memphis likewise had to beat them twice, had to beat Portland twice to advance. So the game was actually pretty good. I mean, it was back and forth. Both teams made runs. Both teams looked like they had the game handled at one point, and it flipped. And it was a fun back and forth encounter. It sucks that John Morant didn't make the playoffs because he's such a fun player to watch. He's exciting. He's a fresh face, and I think he just would have been really fun to watch in the playoffs and see what he could do. But at the end of the day, the experience of Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and that team just outweighed what Memphis had going for them at the time. Now, Portland now, as a reward, they get the Lakers in the first round. And I mentioned, I think Portland could really give the Lakers some trouble. The biggest thing for them is how are they going to handle Anthony Davis? Because Anthony Davis to me is the X factor in this. Portland with Nurkic, I don't know if he's going to be able to handle Davis the whole game. And if the Lakers can unlock Davis and really feed him the ball to get him going, that's going to be scary for the rest of the league because when you have Davis in the paint and a guy like LeBron who can get him the ball at will, basically, that's going to be hard to handle moving forward in the playoffs. So, with that said, I kind of want to go through some round one picks who I think will win each series in the NBA. So we'll start with um, we'll start with the games that already happened yesterday, and then I'll kind of go through the games that go through today, and then we'll go about it that way. So in the Jazz Nuggets, I think the Nuggets will end up winning this series. Uh, if Conley was still here for the Jazz, I may have picked the Jazz, but losing him, especially the way he was playing in the bubble before he left because of his newborn, I think that might be the deciding factor in what pushes the Nuggets over. I do think it'll go 7 games. Uh, both these teams are, both these teams are more than capable of competing at a high level. They're well matched against each other, so it's going to be a lot of back and forth, and we'll see how that goes. Um, Then you have Toronto and Brooklyn. Um, Toronto, they look great yesterday. They look poised to make a defense of the championship run, and I'm picking the Raptors here in 5 games. Then you have the Celtics 76ers. Now, this ended up being a really good game, and what ended up happening was Embiid kind of showed up, and he was the player that I thought he could be without Ben Simmons there. They ended up losing the game, but that's what the Sixers are going to have to do in order to beat the Celtics. They're going to have to run through Embiid, and Embiid's just going to have to unlock another level here, where he just got to say, "Hey, I'm the best player on the court in this game, and no one's going to outplay me." If he does that and he can unlock that, Sixers have a shot. I still think the Celtics are going to pull out of the series just because with Jason Tatum, without Ben Simmons there, he was a pretty good defender, and Ben Simmons would have been the guy defending Tatum. And now they don't really have anybody who can really defend Tatum. So I think that's going to be the X factor there. So I'm picking the Celtics here in 6. And then we have the Clippers Mavericks. Like I said, I already talked about this a little bit with with Luka and how he performed. The Clippers, we know who they are. They're a contender. They know how to handle their business. They're gonna come out. They're gonna show up every day. So I think the Clippers are still gonna take this series. It'll be interesting to see how far Dallas can push them. But I think this is gonna be the Clippers in 5. Now, move on to Tuesday's set of games. We have the Bucks Magic series. I'm not even going to waste too much time talking about this. Bucks are probably the overall favorite to win the championship this year. They have the best player in the league right now, in my opinion, in Giannis. They have a really good team. They have Chris Middleton, who's an all-star. They have Eric Bledsoe, who is starting to come into his own and is starting to live up to that contract that he got paid a couple years ago. They got the Lopez brothers, who are formidable in the paint. Uh, they have a lot of talent, and I think they're going to sweep the Magic in the first round. Then we have Heat Pacers. This is going to be a good series. I really like this Heat team. They're pretty deep. They have a team where they can roll out 9 guys in any given night, and that's only going to prove beneficial for them. Now with Indy, obviously they don't have Oladipo. TJ Warren, he's been pretty good in the bubble, pretty damn good, I should say. But I don't know if it's sustainable. I don't think he's going to be able to do that over a 7-game period against the Heat. So I'm going to pick Miami here. I think Miami will beat him in 6, and they'll end up moving on to the next round. Um, the next series, which is the one I'm most looking forward to, is the Thunder Rockets. Now, a lot of storylines that obviously go into this one. We have Chris Paul playing against the Rockets. We got Russell Westbrook playing against the Thunder. We have the falling out between Chris Paul and James Harden. A lot of fun storylines here. Um, you know, Chris Paul, he's still a guy who proved that he still has it. There is a reason why OKC is where they are, and that's because of Chris Paul and the leadership that he brings to the team. Now, I will say, in the past, I haven't really been too much of a fan of his in terms of his whininess and how he complains. But you gotta respect what he's done in this league, and he's still consistent. He's still taking a team to the playoffs. He's still getting a team to compete for him, regardless of who's around him. Now I know he has some good talent around him with Shea Alexander, which I think he's gonna be the next guy, obviously at OKC, and I think he has the potential of being a future All Star. Um, but as this series goes, we'll see. We'll see. It'll be fun to see because it's going to be small ball Rockets versus um, the size of OKC. Steven Adams is probably going to be a non-factor in this game, in this series, because I don't see how you can really play him effectively with the lineup that Houston puts out there and not lose anything, defensively. So I still think I actually like OKC Thunder in this one. I think it could go either way, but I like the Thunder in 7 in this one. And then the last series is the Lakers Trailblazers. Um, this is going to be a fun series. You got Damian Lillard, you got LeBron James, you got Anthony Davis. Those right there, those are three. Those are probably the three of the, I would say, top 8 players in the bubble right now, and they're all in one series. So it's going to be really fun to watch. I don't think Portland is going to win the series by any means, but I do think it give them some trouble. Portland last few games in the bubble haven't really played too much defense, so that's really going to kind of hurt him. But um, I think Lakers will go out there, take care of business. I think they'll win this series in 5. Um, I do think every game's going to be fun. I do think every game's going to be close. But I think just the sheer star power of the Lakers is going to overpower the Trailblazers here. So those are my round 1 picks. So now I'm going to get into my gambling picks for the week. Um, Before we get into that, though, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come right back and get into the picks. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the gambling picks for this week. Once again, the picks that I'm making are for Wednesday, for the day of Wednesday. So I'll make sure this podcast runs, early morning Wednesday, so that way you guys have enough time to go ahead and place your bets. Still working out a name for this segment. Um, um, I had a good friend of mine, Dennis Albert, kind of throw some names out there. So still kind of tinkering with them. But he kind of gave me a suggestion of betting a fictional $500 and tracking that every week and see how I do. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start this week with the fictional $500, and then every week I'm going to place 5 bets, and then to kind of go along with the theme of the name 5 for podcasting, and let you know how we go every week. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So the first bet I'm going to take is Columbus Blue Jackets versus Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm going to take the Columbus Blue Jackets money line. Um, the money line is plus 150 in favor of Columbus. They have their backs against the wall. It's an elimination game for them. I think they're going to come out guns blazing. I think they're going to come out firing. I think they're going to do everything they can to extend this series. So that's why I like my money on Columbus. Also, they're a good team. They swept the Lightning last year. Obviously, it's a different story this year, but I think they're not gonna go out with a fight. So I'm gonna place $100 on Columbus Blue Jackets at plus 150 money line. I also like two bets in the Los Angeles Clippers Dallas Mavericks series. I like the over. The over is set at 231. Um, Both teams hit this easily in their first game. Um, I think that they'll be able to hit that again. Dallas doesn't really play too much defense. I know the Clippers do, but Dallas's offense is also really good. So I think they'll be able to hit that number. I'm going to put another 100 on the over at 231. And then I also like the Clippers at as a 6 point favorite. Um, you know, every game that they've played against Dallas, they've beaten them handily going back to the regular season. As much as I like Luka and as much as I like this Dallas team, I think Luka can only do so much by himself. So I think the Clippers will be able to cover that 6 point spread. So I'm going to put 150 on the 6 point spread for the Clippers. I also like the Raptors as an 11 point favorite. I think they're just too deep for the Nets. The Nets, outside of Joe Harris and Karis LeVert, they don't really have much offensive firepower. So as long as the Raptors can contain them, I think they'll be able to cover that 11 point spread uh, pretty handily. So I put $50 on that. And then I also like some Champions League action. Bayern Munich versus Olympic Lyon. Um, the over under for that is set at 3.5. So just from watching Bayern Munich last week and see what they've done in the past few games, they alone can hit that over just by them. So them combined with Leon, I like the over on that. I do think that they both can hit that. Um, so I'm gonna put $100 on that as well. So that's to kind of recap, I put 100 on Columbus Blue Jackets money line at plus 150. I put 100 on the over for the Dallas Mavericks Los Angeles Clippers game at 231. I also put 150 on the Los Angeles Clippers as a 6 point favorite. I have $50 on Toronto as an 11 point favorite, and then $100 on the over 3.5 for Bayern Munich and Olympic Lyon in Champions League. So that'll wrap up this week's episode. Um, I am planning on releasing another episode later this week, doing a 2-part NFL preview. So part 1, I'll probably do the NFC, which I'm hoping to release Friday, and then part 2 will be next week, which will be the AFC. So I'll go through the divisions, talk about each team, who I like to win the division, and talk about some of the over under win total set for some of these teams as well. So we'll have that running hopefully the end of this week by Friday. As always, follow the podcast on social media, Instagram, Twitter at 5 for podcasting. Again, that's at the number 5 for podcasting. You can also follow me personally on Twitter at avpatel730. Be sure to subscribe, rate us, follow us on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, uh, you know, name suggestions for the gambling segment of my podcast, please reach out to via email at 5forpodcasting@gmail.com. That's 5 spelled out for podcasting@gmail.com. And that'll do it for today. See you guys next week.